Hello, my darlings. This is Maria and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. On this channel, we talk about spirituality, consciousness, secrets of the universe. We go deep, so you're missing out if you're not subscribed. For those of you that have been with me for some time, I'm sending you a big virtual hug. It's good to see you again. Today, I figured we're going to talk about past life regression. Some of you may know I have been running a podcast for the past 2-something years, and our top downloaded episode of all time is about a past life regression. It's actually a past life regression meditation that I did way back when. And so I figured today we're going to do a little bit of a refresher on past lives, and I'm going to address some of the common questions around past life regression. Now, before we dive into the questions and the myths, the legends, the misconceptions around past life regression, I figured I would tell you around how I use past life regression in my day-to-day life, things that it helped me with, and things that I recommend that you use past life regression for. So I think there's obviously some of the more obvious things that people use past life regressions for are when they're problem solving. When there is a big trauma, when there is something that is happening in their life that they cannot seem to pinpoint the original, let's say the root cause of. Very often, people would use past life regression to try to descend into another state of consciousness and get access to the Akashic records and look into that problem and that issue. Some of the deepest healing across all levels of our body, from our physical body up to our lightest bodies, can be fixed with a very well done past life regression. So understanding phobias, for instance, is one of the reasons to resort to past life regression. I find that past life regressions really help in understanding yourself better, understanding your patterns, hidden, covert, and very obvious patterns, understanding where they come from and how you formed them really enables you to be better prepared to make any shifts and changes, or just to be better aware around why you do the things that you do, why you act the way that you act. Very often, we come with a particular set of behaviors, patterns, and we are not always aware of where those patterns are coming from. So for me, past life regression has been one of the primary tools that I use, outside of things that would be communicating with my spirit guides, for instance, around trying to understand myself and my patterns. Because once you understand yourself, you are able to move through life with a lot more momentum. You understand what your true strengths are and where they come from. And that really sets you up for success in life. So in terms of patterns, I usually start with my personal patterns, right? Understanding myself is kind of like the number one objective, because before I can understand the universe, I have to understand my own history. So very often, or shall I say rather, when I started doing past life regressions, I started looking for patterns. And I noticed that I have typical lives. At this point, I must have done over 100 past life regressions. Now, not all of them were full-blown regressions. So when you kind of start in going into your past lives, very often the very few first regressions that you do are quite lengthy. They may last from, let's say, 45 minutes up to 5 hours for those that want to go really, really deep. One thing I've found with those regressions is literally you can spend all day watching the movie of your past life. It may or may not be helpful. I highly recommend a very lengthy past life regression for everybody at least once in their lives, once or twice. But very often when I do problem solving, or when I have a very specific ask from the universe, the type of past life regressions that I do take me anywhere from 2 minutes to 20 minutes. That is my normal, my average. So what are the things that I would resort to as far as past lives? So understanding either my general patterns or a particular pattern. For example, if I want to know what occupations I held the most often or the most frequently in the past. I can do a series of very quick past life regressions, just checking in and watching and observing. I may want to understand what karmic patterns I have, for instance, around my family life, around childbirth, or around marriage, or, do I have a pattern of divorce, for instance? And I can use, past life regressions to try to understand what are the patterns. So let's say if my marriage goes wrong, what usually happens? Or if I blame myself for being a bad parent, what usually happens? Or, I would look at other relationships that I have, for instance, patterns around my friendships. What are the patterns that I've been running as far as my friendships that are fairly obvious from my past lives? And you would be surprised that very often you do run a lot of patterns. Time and time again, as I descend into my past lives, it's actually fairly predictable how I would react. And very often we put ourselves in very similar situations over and over and over again to see if we can finally climb out of a karmic knot or toxic pattern that doesn't serve us. And so very often past behavior is a really, really good predictor of future behavior, if not the best predictor. So that's that. Understanding your own patterns, understanding your own traumas, understanding your phobias. I already mentioned that. Then, and that's another aspect of past life regression that I really, really love, is understanding your interactions with very specific people from your life. Very often when somebody comes into your life and into our lives and really touches us, really shifts something for us, let's say it is a partner or a best friend or even an arch nemesis. If they touch us, most likely this is not the first time that we have met them. And very often I find it extremely helpful to try to understand the unresolved history that we do have. And so before going into past life regression, I would imagine connecting my thread to the thread of a person that I'm interested to look up in the informational field. And then I would ask the universe to connect me to the lives that are the best. So the lives that we shared with that particular person, that's the first ask from the universe. But the second is to show me the life or the lives that are that are best examples of where our collective pattern comes from. And the universe may show you one life or a couple of lives, and it would be very easy for you to see what is happening and what is the pattern and why are the things the way that they are. For instance, in this life, you may have a colleague or a coworker, and for one reason or another, the coworker, the relationship may be extremely toxic. And in this life, right, you may not be able to understand why that is the case. It's just the person makes you feel a certain way, and you make them feel a certain way, and you may take this for granted and be like, well, you know what? It's just a coworker, so who cares? And one day in the future, we'll part ways, and we're no longer going to be coworkers, and there goes that. The problem is, if you have a tension or a toxicity within a coworker, if you choose to not resolve it in this present life, most likely you're going to meet again in a future life. So there will come a time, maybe in a remote future, one day, where you're going to have to resolve this karmic knot because it's given to you for a reason. And I find that past life regression is one of the quickest ways. It is the shortcut to try to understand where the pattern is coming from. Very often you would be shown a particular instance from the past, one of your past lives, and multiple past lives, where you were related with this person, where you were friends, where you were connected, and it'll show you where the bad blood is coming from. Again, in this life, there may be no precursors, there may be no bad blood. But in past lives, there is a pattern that you run. Whether that is one person guilting the other, one person betrayed the other, or whatever that pattern was, you're a lot more informed and you're a lot better at addressing the current issues around relationships if you understand the past history. So that's how I use past lives as well. Very often, if there is something in my life that doesn't go right, almost like a failure or like a pattern around failure, for instance, I may choose to look into a past life to understand where that is coming from, or really why it bothers me so. And that's really the most important part because, things go south all the time. Very often, it does not affect us. But if it does, very often it's a karmic knot. If it's a karmic knot, I go to a past life. Now, there are so many other applications. But again, understanding yourself, understanding your patterns, understanding your relationships better, and moving through karma like a champ and like a pro are just some of the very obvious benefits of past life regression. Now, past life regression, I feel like used to be a realm of pseudoscience, and thankfully now thanks to Dolores Cannon, thanks to a lot of other practitioners in the field, and thanks to the school that she frankly created, there are so many more people that are taking practitioners in the field of hypnosis, in the field of past life regression. And so now it's becoming a lot more mainstream. That is only going to continue to happen. So I'm actually really glad that now we're taking past life regression out of the realm of pseudoscience. And we recognize that this actually can be a very therapeutic thing to do. It is one of the healing techniques. It's an awareness technique. It's therefore a very important psychological tool. Now, that being said, I wanted to address some myths, legends around past life regression, some of the questions that came through collective human consciousness, something that, I like to connect to, that I like to draw inspiration from as I'm preparing these videos for you. So the first reason, maybe not the first reason, but one of the main reasons why people remain skeptical about past life regression is this. Everybody's really worried that there are too many people, quote unquote, that believe themselves to be an incarnation of another very, very famous person. Whether that is Napoleon, whether that is Buddha, I don't know, whether that is Mother Mary, whether that is, I don't know, sometimes Marilyn Monroe, like you name it, like there are a lot of famous people. And so sometimes, and it's more so the fear in the collective, right? More so than actual people being shown the same incarnation over and over again. But the fear in the collective human consciousness is this. If so many people, let's say thousands, are watching the same lives when they go back to a past life regression, how can this be real? And how can we trust this? And if we cannot trust this, why are we using this? And kind of wanted to, and now we're going to go real deep and esoteric here, because I think in order to understand why a lot of people believe that they are incarnations of the same person exactly, could be multiple fold. And to understand what's happening, we have to understand certain parts around how the invisible world of spirit is built, is constructed, and is run. So there are many reasons why a few different people can believe and even see a past life of the same exact person. I will give you just probably a few different reasons. They're in no particular order, but I'll probably start with some of the more frequent ones. So probably the first reason why this happens is what I would call a template-like nature of this reality. We live in the world of archetypes, is the bottom line. So essentially every person has a range of archetypes that they wear. It could be a martyr, a savior, it could be a healer is an archetype, the queen is an archetype, a pauper is an archetype. There are so many archetypes. Now, there's actually an infinite number of archetypes in the world. If we look at all of existence, there's an infinite number of archetypes. Here on planet Earth, we don't have an infinite number of archetypes. We actually have a very finite number of archetypes. And these are the archetypes that have been anchored onto planet Earth. What does this mean? Somewhere, some time ago, a soul came and brought this archetype here and lived a life that belonged to a particular archetype. Believe it or not, there was a time on planet Earth where a queen was not an archetype or a princess was not an archetype. And then royalty was created, and there were the first souls that we recognized as royalty that had to anchor the princess and the queen and the king and the prince archetype. All of a sudden, those archetypes became available to Earthians, to any soul that came to incarnate on planet Earth. And as such, they could be tried on for size. It's almost like you should think of archetypes as clothing or fashionable items. It used to be that the red dress was non-existent. All of a sudden, somebody came, created a red dress, wore a red dress, and everybody was like, oh my God, the red dress is really, really awesome. And so the future souls that wanted to incarnate on this planet, then you're like, oh, the red dress is available for me to wear. And this is what essentially happens. So there are a few archetypes, and a lot of them are famous, that are considered to be desirable. Maybe not a few, but a number of archetypes. For instance, for a female, a warrior is, believe it or not, a very desirable archetype. That's why one of these very frequently downloaded archetypes is Joan of Arc. Quite a lot of women, once they, start regressing, would be shown something along the lines of Joan of Arc, or would believe themselves to somehow be connected to that archetype. Not every female, but, a disproportionately large amount of women. Why is that the case? Here's why. When souls are choosing an incarnation, if they're planning an experience that they've never gone through before, they don't want to descend into this time-space reality, get out behind the veil of forgetfulness, forget everything about what they are, and then fail. So souls are optimizing for success, and your probability of success usually depends on how much past experiences you've had. So again, past behavior is a really, really good predictor of future behavior. Now, not every soul has lived a life of a female warrior, especially to the degree of Joan of Arc, when she was truly enough so, and that she received guidance from spirit and she kind of died, very tragically, but she did represent that relentless warrior spirit for a very young female, which was quite unique and extraordinary for an archetype. And so a lot of souls are going to borrow this outfit even prior to incarnating. So they go into this large library, if you will, and they just upload the life of Joan of Arc into their hard drive, into their memory bank. It's not the same as living an incarnation, but it is the next best thing. And so what ends up happening is they come here and they have a memory, a remembrance, and within their light bodies, they carry a frequency of Joan of Arc because they borrowed it. It's kind of like borrowing a book from the library. So that's one way that a lot of people can perceive that they're Joan of Arc. This is not the only way. There are souls that are considered to be collective souls, or there are incarnations that are considered to be collective incarnations. What does that mean? There's usually one or a few souls. Well, let me rewind. Very often, this happens with spiritual teachers, for instance, or people who start spiritual movements. It wouldn't just be one person, but it would be a group of souls that chooses to incarnate as one being. Very often, there's going to be one or two or three sponsoring souls that bear the grunt of karma that this person is going to accumulate. But there could be thousands of streams of different souls and essentially pockets of energy from different souls, all donating and almost investing into one human being that has a massive planetary mission. And so very often, these souls then would go and incarnate back in their individual bodies, but they would all have a memory of being a particular, let's say, deity from the past or a particular leader from the past. That is another very, very plausible scenario. A third option is actually you may have been a spirit guide for this soul, this famous person. By the way, depending on incarnation, a person can have hundreds of spirit guides. So I may be living my life today as one human, arguably one human, right? We're not going to dive into how many entities live inside of me. That's beyond the point. What is the point is I could be having hundreds of spirit guides. Some of them may be active during different stages of my life. Now, all of my spirit guides, in the same way that all of your spirit guides, have full access to your Akashic records, to your history, and by the way, your consciousness. Now, let's take that with a grain of salt. Not every spirit guide is created equal. You have your primaries, you have your secondaries, you have your tertiaries, but very often they have very high degrees of access to your consciousness. So essentially, whatever I am seeing as a 3D incarnated human, all of my hundreds of spirit guides are going to also be able to see through my eyes. So essentially, whatever I'm living through, a part of them is vicariously living through me. That being said, if they then come and incarnate on planet Earth, then they would have a memory of almost kind of like quasi living my life as if they were me, whereas they were actually just guiding me from upstairs. So that's another way how this could get really complicated, and that's how multiple souls can have a memory of the same exact thing. There is a fourth option here. The fourth option is very often, let's say, the deities of the past, like let's call it, I don't know, like Isis, Athena, Inanna, like any of the like large gods, goddesses of the past, Zeus, etc. It doesn't really matter. Like whatever pantheon you go into, very often one of the modes of their teaching has been through sharing the vibration, their own vibration, or sharing almost like a part of their soul with the people, right? So very often a lot of past deities, for instance, were actually just very highly evolved extraterrestrials that traveled here as teachers, and humans call them deities or call them gods or goddesses because their level of development was just so much greater than that of humans at the time. And so when a deity, or like when a high vibrational extraterrestrial, when a being that is evolved shares their knowledge, very often they share a part of their vibration through words, through just essentially etherically, right? Through sharing emotional energy, mental energy, etc. And so that type of imprint doesn't go into nowhere, because every time you share your energy, there's somebody, like a human, right, on the other side that's receiving it. So very often humans that studied from these deities, for instance, or from great teachers, had an imprint in their own biological fields, in their auric fields, if you will. They had an imprint of that teacher or that person or that deity that they interacted with. And because of that, the universe also, essentially everything is a mirror, right? The student is always the mirror of the teacher. The teacher is always the mirror of the student. And they built this bridge, they built this connection. So very often, even if you were not the teacher, but either studied from them or lived during their times, very often you would have access to like parts and portions of the life of that teacher as if you were that teacher, if that makes sense. Or you were that famous person if you were just around them, if that makes sense. By the way, this does not even begin to cover the entirety of the reasons. Like I think I gave you like 30-40% of the answer to the big question of why do so many people remember the same thing over and over again. And by the way, there's one very, very important one. For instance, Mother Mary is actually a really, really good example, just because, listen, as far as female archetypes go, she's kind of pretty well known. And so a lot of women, once they start going into spirituality, are going to have or are going to start believing that they're, let's say, Mother Mary or Mary Magdalene or one of those, Christian deities, potentially Jesus if you're the guy. Why is that happening? There are these large sponsoring archetypes right now that are kind of like on a pedestal, if you will. And so essentially when Jesus and his inner circle came, they were anchoring quite a number of archetypes. And so right now, a lot of these archetypes are considered almost like North Stars for a lot of souls. They're considered to be templates that you, as a soul, you aspire to live into. And so very often souls prior to coming here would download these particular archetypes and again, have them on their flash drive. And again, that creates an understanding or like a thought that maybe I was that person. The most important part is it doesn't really matter. And that's the good news. If you have downloaded something or lived something, as long as you have that, access in the Akashic records, that is good news, you guys. Because one thing that's really, really important about past lives, and that actually addresses my second question, or the second question that I got from the collective. And the second question, by the way, that I got from the collective is, how can we trust what we're seeing? What if we're seeing the wrong life? What if we're seeing somebody else's life? Can I trust what I'm seeing? I'm just really worried that I'm going to see a life. I'm going to think it's mine and it's somebody else's. I find it really, really endearing because upstairs in the realm of souls, mine versus his versus hers does not really matter. It's ours. So if one soul somewhere on a very remote planet achieved something, it is celebrated as a collective achievement. And that is the freaking amazing news, you guys, because it doesn't really matter whether what you're being shown when you go into a past life regression is your life or this, somebody else's life. It really doesn't matter because the pride of ownership is not what matters here. What matters is this. If the universe, if your world is aligning you to this particular life, it is not random because nothing is random. And so it's happening for a reason. So whatever life you're seeing, you're meant to be seeing that life. You should be asking yourself, what is the lesson for me here? Why am I seeing this? what should I know about this life? What should be the conclusion or the learnings that I draw from seeing this and watching this, and how can I apply this to my life, right? So don't worry if it's yours or the guy next to you. It's like, who cares? It's all ours anyway, because this is just one large collective lore. And so if you're being shown it, just take it as a sign, because that is what it is. A couple more things. So as you're diving into your own journey with past life regression, there are two things that matter. First thing is, how do you connect? Like, how do you actually watch the life? And the second one is the selection process. Maybe let me rephrase it. It's actually really important which life you're being shown, and then also how to see it. Once you figure out these two parts, you're golden. You're going to become the past life regression pro. So it's actually really, really important. So let's maybe start with the selection, because that's where a lot of people get confused. It's actually really important to provide the universe with crystal clarity around the life that you're trying to see. What I find is a lot of people just descend into past life regression without having any intention. And it is like walking into a random library in a random city, walking to a random shelf on that library, picking a random book and opening the random book on the random page. What are the odds that in that book on that page, you're going to get the information that is relevant to you right now? I mean, there's probably some degree of probability, but let's just say it's not a very scientific way to do trauma work, to do relationship work, to do personal work. It's just not a very strategic way to live. So the first thing you have to get right with past life regression is which life you're actually seeing. And with that, intention always comes first. Have a crystal clear intention of what it is that you're trying to see. Extreme clarity. So literally, obviously, you're communicating with the universe. So you have to tell the universe exactly what you want to see. Show me the life where, let's say, I had trauma around fatherhood. Show me the life where I was, maybe abandoned and, maybe where I was homeless, if that's what you need to see. Let's say there is a fear around homelessness that you have. Let's say that you're maybe worried about dying from, becoming terminally ill and dying of disease. Then you would ask the universe to show you the lives where that already happened to try and understand your pattern. But being really, really crystal clear. And then essentially allowing the universe to pick for you and showcase you that life. There are a couple of ways that you can do that. So essentially, two techniques that I love is either imagine there's a corridor, and in a meditative state, you're standing in the corridor, and there are all of these doors aligning the corridor to the right and to the left. Then there is an intention, right? Then you have to state your intention. Please show me the life that XYZ, whatever that life is. And then what you're going to see is you're going to watch these doors start moving. It's kind of like really funny to witness. And then one of them lights up from the other side. It's almost like there is light, and you can tell that there is light behind that door. That is the door that you need to pick. There is another one with wells. Imagine there are like wells. Like essentially you're in the garden and there are all these wells around you, the wells with the water. And you would, again, state your intention to the universe. The universe, show me the life of XYZ. And you would watch, it's almost like musical chairs. These wells are starting to rotate around you, like there is a rotation that's created. And then essentially it's like that when the music stops. When the music stops, there's one well that's right in front of you. That's the well with the life that the universe has selected for you. Sometimes I also ask one of my spirit guides to take me to a particular incarnation. I have my spirit dragon. I can ask my angel guides. I can ask my phoenix bird. I can ask my eagle. Any type of flying creature. You can ask your unicorn if you have unicorn spirit guides, or a Pegasus. It doesn't really matter. I'm going on a tangent here, but anything that has wings essentially can carry you into another, essentially any past or future life. So you can always ask your guide to take you to a particular incarnation. So that is how you solve the problem of like selecting which life. The second is, how do you actually descend into a life? And again, I may have said it in multiple podcasts, so if I'm repeating myself, please bear with me. I'm really going to give you like a quick synopsis. Essentially, if you're looking for a past life regression, you want to emulate the movement backwards. So past life regression is always moving back. So if it is a rotation, you would be rotating kind of like to the left. So essentially, if you're rotating to the left and in the back, to the back, that is essentially you going back in time. If you're rotating essentially to the right and forward, that would be a future life, if that makes sense. Falling. Essentially, if you're falling like Alice in Wonderland, do you remember? She just kept falling. That is, especially if you're falling in like a black tunnel, and then you're essentially eventually going to drop somewhere on the bottom of the well of the tunnel, and then there's going to be light. That's like a very easy way to do past life regression. You may imagine yourself sitting on a cloud and moving backwards, kind of like, again, backwards in time. Backwards is I'm showing you to the left. So essentially to the left, to the back, or literally you would imagine yourself floating on the cloud and moving back, like back instead of forward. That's another way to descend into a past life. A lot of people use a technique where they get progressively younger, right? So we're very used to timeline being very linear forward, right? If I am 20, next year I'm going to be 21, the year after I'm going to be 22. If you reverse that, and let's say right now you're 20, you're going to be moving into 19, 18, 17, 16, yada, yada. That takes you a whole other direction. By the way, you can skip years, right? So essentially, the first time, very often when people regress, they regress in 5 or 10 year increments, right? So you're going to be moving from 20 to 15 to 10. And then you're going to imagine yourself in a womb, and then what happens before your mother's womb. That's how you do your first past life regression. If you want a full-blown walkthrough, I have a meditation on my podcast. My podcast is called Conversations with My Higher Self. It's available on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Episode 60 is going to take you through a full-blown past life regression. That's that. The most important part about any past life regression, I don't see enough people doing it, is this. Once you have seen what you have seen, especially if you have been shown something that's traumatic, especially if you've been shown something that's uncomfortable or weird or strange or you cannot interpret, which is going to be literally probably 70% of what you're seeing is going to not immediately click or not immediately make sense. Here's what you would need to do. You need to imagine yourself as your higher aspect, as your higher self, as somebody that's out of body, right? So you may finish looking at a past life by planting yourself into the very last day of that life and then kind of like exiting. And essentially you would be watching your body, your dead body, right? I know it sounds morbid, but really not so bad when you actually go into these regressions. The most important part is to connect with your higher self, the higher consciousness, or at least one of your spirit guides if you're not going to reconnect or if you're not going to connect with your higher self, and ask them the question, why did you show me this life? What is my takeaway from this life? And what do you think actually happened? Like, what should my learning be? I will tell you this. What I thought happened in this lifetimes, and what I thought sometimes as like my 3D human self, what I thought happened in this life, and what I thought it taught me versus the perspective of my higher self on the same exact movie, on the same exact life, could be polar opposites. And sometimes what you think you learn is not what you actually learned. And so the one step I would never miss is the recap with your higher self, the recap with your spirit guide about what happened and what is the lesson. And by the way, another really, really good question to ask your higher self is this: how is this relevant to my current experience? Because it's not random that you showed me this. So why did I need to see this particular life right now? What does this tell me about what I'm living through and what I'm going through? So all of these things really are going to make sure that your past life regressions are extremely, extremely impactful. Now, there's another question from the collective around, well, I'm not seeing much, or what I'm seeing is like really fuzzy, or I'm getting some clarity, but then I'm losing clarity around what I'm seeing. So doing past life regressions is really, really hard. So what are your recommendations? Here's the deal, you guys. Not everybody is born with a decalcified pineal gland, or maybe everybody is born with a decalcified pineal gland and then it gets calcified. In order to be really effective at doing past life regression, especially if we're talking like a really quick connection, really crisp and clear picture that you can do on yourself without using like a person to actually guide you, you need your third eyes open. So, opening your third eye should become like an obsession if this is what you want to do, because that is how open your third eye is, how much you're able to work with that part of your body is extremely correlated to how well, how quickly, how fast, and how enjoyable your past life regressions are going to be. But also, don't you worry, because over time, the more you practice it, like the more you actually try to go into a past life and focus on things and start getting things with clarity, the better it is going to be, the easier it's going to be. So practice makes perfect. Like anything else, a third eye is a muscle that has been atrophied in your body because you haven't been using it. If you start using it, I guarantee you, your fifth past life regression is going to be way better than your first. Your 15th past life regression is going to be light years away from even your fifth, right? So literally every time that you go and you try and you practice and you push yourself, it gets better. It gets easier. There are also some tricks around, because the hardest part about connecting is actually the first, call it 30 seconds. Because some people, especially if you're a novice, like if you're just getting started with past life regression, you're not just going to get dropped into a past life and then automatically start seeing everything around you. The easiest first thing to focus on is yourself. Obviously, if you're looking at a past life regression, you are in the body, right? Although there are actually two ways to descend into past life. And by the way, so pro tip, you have a choice when you're looking at past life. You can be in the body of the person that's living it, you. You can be floating above them. So essentially, you can watch the same life as you're floating above them. By the way, because you are accessing the realm of the Akashic records, that's actually the pro tip, not the other one, is this. I like, augmented reality. I like a 360 view of my past lives. What I mean by that is this. If I'm trying to look at a pattern, but I'm in a body, in a particular life, let's say I'm Maria having a relationship with another person, and that other person, let's say, is my mom, right? What I can do, actually, is I can see it from my perspective, but very often I want to see it from my mother's perspective. So I can shift perspectives. When you do past lives, you can shift perspectives and see the same situation from a viewpoint of another person. And by the way, what you can also do is super neat trick. I don't know how many people know about this, is you can listen in on people's conversations, even if you were not present during those conversations, even if they are behind closed doors. So you can follow a particular person and then essentially see their reaction to what happened if they're discussing it with a friend or something. So essentially there are no rules, because it's like watching from, you're watching a movie of a past life. But by the way, and if you've been listening to my podcasts around like Akashic records or channeling, you kind of already know this. So this is going to be old news for you, but for everybody else, here is the big reveal. The Akashic records, the large informational field, the library that Source Consciousness has created, is recording every single thing from multiple perspectives. So right now, it would be recording me talking to you from my perspective, your perspective, the perspective of my cat that's sitting in the corner, the perspective of these roses that are behind me, et cetera, and the perspective of just like a particle of light floating here in ether, if that makes sense. And then one day, if I wanted to do a past life regression on this life sometime in the future or whenever, I would be able to look at this from any of these perspectives or all of them combined. So that is the one thing where I find that, and again, a pro tip is obviously for something that, for somebody that's already advanced. One thing that you could do is improvise, right? There is no need for you to descend and look at a past life just from one vantage point that you lived. If you're trying to get rich, augmented information, you may go outside of the, just say, one well-trodden path and see what else happened or what else somebody said, even if you were not in the room, even if it happened essentially even 5 years after your death. It doesn't really matter. All of this is a record in the Akashic Records field, and you have access to it most likely if you started, if you have been a part of this life. So that's that. Again, so for those of you that are worried about not seeing it, focus on yourself first. So if you're in the body, focus on your hands and your feet, and then focus on what you're wearing, what kind of hair that you have, if you can see the hair. That is always the first thing that would come into focus. And really, look at your hands and be like, okay, my hand Is it young? Is it old? Is it female? Is it male? Is it wrinkly? Does it have jewelry? Like, what does it have, right? And so challenge yourself to first see your hands really clearly. Then you can do the same thing with your feet. What am I wearing? Or what is my, clothing as well? Just look at yourself. And then the next thing that you may ask yourself is, where do I live? Show me where I live. And that is where you start shifting focus from yourself to the surroundings. And from there, you may ask any question around this particular life, and you would be transplanted or transported into a particular part of this life that essentially is or corresponds to the answer, what you're looking for. Okay, well, this was way longer than I originally anticipated. If you guys have any questions about past life regression, do drop those in the comments. If you wanna, if you have any of your own tricks, like any of your pro tips, do drop them in the comments as well, because I know this is, we're creating a community here and sharing is caring, and I know that other people are also reading the comments. On that note, I'm sending you a big virtual hug, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!